you guys. This is a yay. This is a woo. This has been a heck of a week. It's been an amazing week, like amazing. So first of all, I want all of you to know that something is building in the world that's good, that we are a part of, our community here. I have to say thank you. Before I ask you to do anything, let me thank you for what you've already done. All right? It took us almost 6 months to get to 4,000 people. And then we just blew through 300 in like a couple of weeks. Bam! Like 300 people joined us. And wow, that's a lot to happen quickly. And I'm super grateful. So evidently you're not just tapping and liking it, you're recommending it. And I'm getting all kinds of new people because I'm getting messages from the new people saying, I just found you. So I don't know what's going on, but it's good. I can tell you that because nobody is saying, I just found you and I wish that someone would dip you in honey and put you on an ant pile. Nobody's saying that. Everybody's liking the content, and the more sort of authentic, the more it comes from something that really matters to me, not just matters, because it all matters. I don't waste your time. I talk about things from the heart, but it seems like the deeper dive, the more authentic, sort of, let's just say the less afraid I am. Because when I'm on stage, anybody who's ever seen me do stand-up knows I'm fearless. Like I walk on stage, it's like, whew, here we go. Producer Stanton has seen me. He can vouch for that. Fearless on stage. But in this setting, where I have to say you did not pay and come into a comedy club and your mind wasn't wrapped around, okay, I'm in a comedy club, it's jokes. You know, I am mindful that, you know, content in context is everything. And this is a different context. So it's not that I'm afraid, it's that I am being mindful that you may or may not have signed up for certain things. But evidently you did. So thank you. And yes, tap, like, recommend, and share. So let me tell you about this week. I have a friend named Derek. And when I mentioned that, you know, hey, one of the things on my bucket list would be potentially to do a TED Talk. Well, Derek popped up and said, I can probably help you with that. And he said, what would your topic be? What would your topic be? I knew immediately because I've known pretty much for years. Anybody who listened to me on KFI knew that, you know, I remember when I used to fill in when I didn't even have my own show. And I used to go on after Stephanie Miller before they even did the format flip in the summer of 2013, May of 2013. I remember it like it was 5 minutes ago. I walked into the building and Tawala Sharp, who produces Mo Kelly, handed me a story and said, this is the worst. It's the worst story I can recall in recent history, but something tells me that you're going to get it right. And it was the Gabriel story. We know the little boy that was killed and, you know, hiding in plain sight. He was tortured. He was, well, you know, we know what happened to him. It turned into a 6-part show. And the interesting thing is that not only were his stepfather and mother charged, but the 4 workers, CPS or child protective, I don't know exactly what I'm going to say, they were CPS. And it's funny because I despise them so deeply that, you know, Gregory Merritt, who was one of the 4 who came forward after he was fired and he was in his, I think he was 60 exactly, and he was this close to retirement. He actually challenged his firing, even though he'd falsified, he had signed false records and knew they were false. And a boy died as a result of it. He had the nerve to say, I only did it once. So those of you who know me and have listened to me on radio, and that's going to be our Litcast at the end, I'm going to talk about how we met, know that, you know, when I talk about things, I'm dognacious and it's from the heart and I don't stop. So I knew And I said the names of the 4 CPS workers, and it's funny that I can't remember them now, except for Gregory Merritt, because I called him Gregory No Merit, for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and said that they were just as culpable. And I'm not saying that I, in particular, but I do believe in energy. I do believe in momentum. I do believe when people say it's a movement, you know? So actually the 6-part series was through this trial and through this perspective of how this child fell through the cracks. So when Derek asked me, what would your TED Talk be about? I said, waging goodness. Waging goodness. That goodness must be waged like a war campaign. We must wage goodness with the same ferocity that bad people wage badness, or bad wins. It's just that simple. It's a campaign. Random acts of kindness, that sounds nice, but it's, it's like wanting something without taking any kind of real action. Like, yeah, I'm going to pick up litter. Well, I do that, When I'm in the dog run, I pick up other people's poop. I do things to make other people's lives easier as a matter of course, because it's just what you do. But to wage goodness is a whole different ballgame. And when you have a campaign, when you're out, in battle, we have a plan. You have the drum and fife go up front, or if you're part of the picks, up by Hadrian's Wall, you paint yourself blue and scare the heck out of the guys. A lot of people don't realize the Holy Roman Empire reached all the way up to the middle of Scotland at one point. And then the Picts, if anybody saw Braveheart, they painted themselves blue and they ran out naked and made all kinds of weird noise, and bagpipes were designed to scare people. So to wage goodness, and I'm paraphrasing all of that, I'm not looking at my notes, but I have some recollection of history class, which I loved very much. And waging goodness, really waging goodness. Joan of Arc, Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I happen to be Catholic, so those are my 2 references. But the Gandhi, there are people that have found ways of waging goodness, peacefully and with serious thought and purpose of put the tanks here, put the bow and arrow guys in the back, because it's a plan. And I had never had the opportunity, other than with spoken word, to be a comedian, to raise spirits, or to bring attention to a story on KFI. I've never actually had an opportunity drop in my lap to wage goodness. And I got one this week. And here's the story. And many of you know it, but it bears repeating because it is an opportunity. And we have 4,300 people on this YouTube community, and not all of them are crossed over onto my Facebook Live on 3:30, every day at 3:30 Pacific time. So I'm spreading the story, spreading the news. And here's the other thing is that, as I've said, producer Stanton's been very busy. He's got another job. This is just his side hustle. But producer Stanton and I are going to figure out how to set up my iPad and my phone so that we can do YouTube and Facebook, because there's a lot of people that want to join the 3:30, but they're like, I'm not a Facebook person. I'm just, I'm a YouTube guy. If I got an alert, I would watch. Or a lot of the very young people just do Insta. They do Insta and YouTube. They think that Twitter's for old people, and it's a joke. That's what happens when old people and people like the president. And I'm not even saying I'm just saying I know my nieces don't think Twitter's cool anymore, because once other people start using it for other things. In fact, sidebar before we get to my opportunity to wage goodness, on Monday of this week, on my 3:30, I had a precious girl named Eva, who I've been mentoring, working with. She just moved here from Buffalo by herself at 20, wanting better things. And then COVID hit, and we had a chance meeting, like there's any such thing. And we kind of made friends, and we're kind of getting through this COVID thing. You know, I'm mentoring her in the ways of LA and being kind of there for her since she's by herself and isolated. And she's been super helpful and helped me do some stuff in my storage unit. And she's Italian and cooks, and she's adorable. So Eva and I were discussing politics, which I never do publicly, but it was just the two of us. And she was saying how her parents, her mother, who lives in Buffalo, New York, kept saying, "Are you registered in California? Are you going to vote? Voting is so important." And her mother, who is my age, is very invested in her voting. And here's the funny part. Eva's 20, 21, and she was telling me that she's really struggling because she's not excited in any way, shape, or form about any of the stuff that's being discussed. Couldn't care less about the two candidates, as opposed to most people have very strong opinions about the two candidates. She's like, I have to be honest with you, Monique, and this was kind of interesting to me. She said, in a weird way, politics is a joke to me, to my generation, to a lot of my friends. I'm not saying everybody that's young or all the Gen Zers think this way, but I was very curious. I said, what does that mean? She said, I grew up watching Saturday Night Live. Keep in mind, 21 years old, born in 98, 99. She said, and you know, George W. was, she said, in my entire life, we had, you know, George and the Clintons, you know, pretty much like it was always, and I'm trying to think of who's the president. She said when Barack Obama was president, that was kind of cool. But she said, you know, at the end of the day, I've watched politics on The Daily Show, on Saturday Night Live. It's been sketches and buffoonery. And, you know, Tina Fey is Sarah Palin. And I thought, what an interesting frame of reference. I don't have that frame of reference. I grew up where the TV set, as they say on Mad Men, was, you know, 6 feet from the dining room table. And Vietnam was the first televised war. And we watched. And politics was not at all anything to be trifled with or funny. You know, it just wasn't. You took the candidates very seriously. And I remember my parents rushing home from dinner to watch the debates. I remember my father watching Jimmy Carter and what an unlikely candidate he was. I mean, a lot of people think that Trump was a highly unlikely candidate 4 years ago. Jimmy Carter, I mean, he was a peanut farmer from Georgia, whose, you know, brother was Billy Carter, had Billy Beer. He had his own beer. He got in trouble for urinating on the Wailing Wall. I'm pretty sure that happened, something like that. And his mother, Lillian, who was quite elderly, rode a motorcycle. Like, this was the first family. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, when this whole CB, you know, and if anybody is over 45 or 50, they probably remember the song Convoy, Breaker 19, this here's Rubber Duck. And you know, the first family, I believe that Rosalind Carter had a CB handle. This is all coming back to me and probably bringing back a lot of memories to you guys. But yeah, that the Carters were very interesting. They were an interesting first family. And then we went next level. That was in the late 70s. We went next level in the 90s with Bill Clinton playing the saxophone. And Martha Quinn asking Bill Clinton, a presidential candidate, boxers or briefs? What? You're asking a candidate for the presidency of the United States if he wears chones? And what kind? What? So, you know, getting back to sweet little Eva, we had a lot of discussions this week. And she was on my show on Monday when the opportunity to, you know, she was on Tuesday, excuse me, because Monday, and she got to see the aftermath. Monday was the day that the opportunity to wage goodness dropped in my lap. Here's what happened. because it's one of those, you know, you can't help if you don't know. So we have on the 3:30. Oh, and all of that is to say that Eva is very rarely on Facebook, and her whole life is Instagram and YouTube. So on Sunday, I got an email right after the 3:30 of private message, a Facebook private message, messenger, from one of my, I guess you would call them friends, Facebook friends, even though it's an official fan page. And it was from a woman who goes by the handle Almost London. And I'm telling you this for a reason, because I would like you to friend her. When you hear the story, you will, and many of you have. Her name is Almost London, and she's my friend on Monique Marvez official fan page, and I believe even on my personal Monique Marvez page, which is maxed out at 5,000. Please don't try to friend me there because I don't have any room. But Monique Marvez official fan page is grows, and I started another page because I never updated the other one, and technology eludes me. And evidently, if you don't upgrade when they ask you to, then it gets all the backside gets a little wonky and crossed wires. So there's also Monique Marvez comedian, and I posed to both of them. So you have Monique Marvez official fan page, which I never liked. I thought the name was too long. I didn't set it up. Somebody else did. However, now that I'm learning, we also have Monique Marvez comedian, and that one's very simple. And to make everything easy, I have my website, MoniqueMarvez.com. Everything's there. So that being said, Almost London lives in San Jose, California, Santa Clarita, San Jose. She lives up south of San Francisco, and her real name is Elena. And she sent me a beautiful message saying that she had missed a couple of the 3:30s, which surprised me because she's always there. Her name pops right up, and we have a beautiful little community of people, and her name, always pops up. And she said that she had been missing because she had gotten a bad cancer diagnosis and that the cancer had spread. She named all the places, not good, shoulder, lung, etc. And that she was in need of a miracle. And could we ask our 3:30 group if there's anybody that believes in prayer or healing or good vibes or whatever you believe in, energy, positive thoughts, the power of positive thinking, anything at all, she would be happy. And I told people, if you don't believe in prayer, I call it soaring. Send out a request, SOAR. There you have it. Opportunity in my lap, did it. So on Monday's show, I spoke specifically about this little orchid plant that I just wouldn't give up on. And I moved it to a couple different vases and a couple different little places in the sun. And bam, buds were opening. It looked like it was going to die. And it was the furthest thing from it. It was just doing its own thing in its own time. And then I turned the 3:30 over to Almost London and her plight, and could we please help her? Well, the outpouring was magnificent. Magnificent. The 3:30 gang was all over that. In fact, there was somebody who lives near her that went to her home evidently last night. There were plans for someone to cook them dinner, her and her 12-year-old son. She is a single mom who had a child late in life. She is 54 years old with a 12-year-old boy who was staring down a bad prognosis. She has a PET scan on Monday the 19th. And so the 3:30 gang just went to town. Everybody was just, whoosh. She sent me a message that night. And as if that were not enough, her message was amazing. I got a message from her son, Landon, thanking me and used very specific verbiage, which made me feel good. He said that he saw his mother happy and strong, which is important. Well, as if that were not enough, on Friday, I got a message from Elena's sister saying, thank you. for what you've done for my sister. And that, I mean, it's been amazing. And sisters are different and they're warm and touchy-feely. But if that were not enough, Elena's brother, who had not been on Facebook and even said, and there you have it, you know, I've been off, well, I guess the politics or whatever. He said, I had taken a break from Facebook completely, but I heard what you did for my sister. And then he went back on Facebook and asked all of his friends. So it was one of those things when you wage goodness, it just spreads. The 330 gang, they were asking on their pages because I saw some of them because I followed them back. And then Elena's siblings reached out to me, and in specific, her brother, which is, you know, unique for a man to write something so heartfelt and emotional and then bring his page back to life in order to support his sister, and even said, the prayers are working, my sister's tumors are shrinking. So she has a PET scan on Monday the 19th. Maybe she just felt like they were shrinking. I don't know how we know yet, but we will find out. And all I'm saying is that was amazing that we as a group, as a collective, as an energetic force had an opportunity to actually not talk about something, to wage goodness, to send messages and heartfelt wishes and prayers. And somebody actually physically went there and cooked. So yay us. So then I want to turn the table and say that I had a weird thing happen, and I'm so grateful that I have, you know, I have a phone, I have an iPad, because I send myself messages. And I started thinking about, you know, race and ethnicity yesterday, because, you know, I think it's unfortunate, but a lot of what's going on right now has to do with the fact that the COVID situation, I like to call it the pause for the cause, because it's done me specifically, personally, no harm, meaning I haven't gotten sick. I've been out of work, but I'm better than some. I can do Zoom shows. I've done some Zoom comedy shows, and I had some savings because I've been blessed in the past. So it hasn't done me any harm. To the contrary, it forced me to pivot. It forced me to have a bigger picture view of my talents and how I could use them. And at the end of the day, for me, it's always about the work. So if the only way I can do my work, which I see as, you know, uplifting spirits and creating, you know, when I say that, I mean, I don't mean like, you know, Brother Loves Travel and Salvation show. I mean, hey, Almost London just popped up. Yes, please keep sending her love. That it, you know, I'm not saying that it's Brother Loves Travel and Salvation show. I'm saying as a comedian, it's the best gig in the world. You see immediate cause and effect. It's like a doctor giving people drugs. Like I say, you know, comedy has a rhythm. It's like da 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 da. Like I can watch somebody doing comedy with the volume down and know if they're killing by the rhythm. It's a rhythm. It's a wave of interaction. I send the joke out to you. You understand it. You get it. You send the wave of laughs back to me. It's amazing. Talk about energetic flow. I love being a comedian. So if I don't have the opportunity to do it that way on stage, on a cruise ship, in a theater, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da, well, I've done radio for years and I've done podcasts. And I understand that at some point you have sort of an internal gyroscope that's like, this is working, you're being entertaining and funny and making people feel better, or at the very least making them think about things in their own lives. So again, going back to me being fearless, I want to talk about, for me, it's been a pause for the cause, but I am not insensitive. I am not, as we say in the parlance of our day, tone deaf, that it has created enormous hardships for a lot of people that were already living on the margins, because if we're honest, we had a massive financial meltdown in 2008, 2009, some people never fully recovered. They continued to live their lives. They continued to pay their mortgages or send their children to college or pay their rent if they didn't own a home, or if they lost a home and they had to rent, or they got foreclosed on, or chose to walk away from something because they just knew. My mother did a short sale. It was a problem. It changed her ability to buy another house freely and easily in San Francisco, which is a massive market, very expensive market. And so, to be perfectly candid, my mother lives in a prefab because it was much easier to go into a prefab than to buy a brick and mortar house in San Francisco after the short sale. So I'm not immune to these things. And my mother's a professional. She's a nurse who makes a lot of money, but she made a lot of money, but she taught nursing, but she lived in San Francisco, and it's very, very expensive there. And when there was an enormous challenge, unfortunately, she was already of a certain age. There was talk of retirement, blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying is that COVID is almost like the second punch of a punch that we, as a society, maybe never fully recovered. Maybe we weren't seeing stars, but we were still a little bit disoriented. We hadn't had the opportunity to build up our reserves and savings. And let's face it, for the last 20 years, it's not like it was when our children, when our parents were young and they came out of what was called the greatest generation, or they were the children of Depression era people that, saved wax. And I talked about my grandmother last week, like when we were done eating spaghetti, if there was any sauce, talk about COVID, there was any sauce left in the bottom of our plates, my grandmother had no shame about putting leftover sauce, if we were wrong about our noodle to sauce ratio, right back in the pot. And she was like, well, we're going to heat it anyway. It'll kill the germs, whew, nothing got wasted in my house, in my childhood. So I understand, as I sit in my nice apartment, driving a very decent car, that I am blessed and fortunate. Yes, that is my car. That I am blessed and fortunate beyond measure. But I also see, as we get closer to decisions, I don't even like to talk about politics, to decisions being made, that there is a divide. And the divide of, what's really being talked about is it's minorities, it's race, it's women, it's the glass ceiling, it's the have and the have-nots. That's a lot of it. It's a lot of it. I have my ballot here, and I had to laugh. This is my actual ballot that I was going to walk it to the post office near my home because I want to support the post office, but I'm a little bit afraid, I think I want to drop it in a drop box. I don't even know who to trust. How crazy is that I don't know where to put my ballot. And I think there's even a way to track it. So even though I'm not even remotely, technologically inclined, I'm going to figure out how I can track my ballot, because I know you can do it. It says it somewhere that there's a barcode, and then it'll tell you where it goes all along the way, just like a UPS package. So I started reading about why people want this and why they want that, and why Uber drivers want this particular thing or don't want this particular thing. So I'm actually taking the time. And then I got to the national election page, right? I got to the national vote for one party. Okay, so one of the candidates you can vote for is Donald J. Trump and Michael R. Pence. They're Republican. Duh. Then you have Gloria La Riva and Sunil Freeman. I never even heard of these people. And they are the Peace and Freedom Party. Then you have, are you ready for this? Rocky De La Fuente Guerra and Kanye Omari West. Now, mind blown. To me, That's very much speaks to my friend Eva. That goes back to, politics being a joke. Like when Kanye West can buy his way onto the ballot, I don't know what that costs, but he's here, and not as the president, as a VP. He said he was going to run for president. Kanye Omari West is on the ballot. He's on the ballot. Like, can you guys see that? I'm sure producer Stanton can do a better job of this than I'm doing. There it is. There it is. It's backwards. But yeah. All right. So, alrighty there. I will not be voting for Kanye West, for the record. But here's the part that scares me. How many kids, millennials, young millennials, and Gen Zers will be like, screw it, the whole thing's a joke. I'm voting for Kanye. They're just going to throw their vote away because they think it's funny. Daunting. So as I was reading all of these things and even just reading the headlines about what they're about, increased funding sources for public schools, allows diversity as a factor in public employment, authorizes bonds continuing stem cell research. As I went on and on and on, the kidney dialysis centers, restricts parole for certain offenses. It goes on and on, right? As I did a deep dive, I started seeing where at the root of it really comes down to people in need. People in need. If you have a kidney problem, or if you work for, there's people that evidently want Uber to have people as employees. Well, I'm not a fan of that. I think as a country, the more we can empower people to be their own little entrepreneurs and run their own little businesses and just be a network of entrepreneurs responding within a grid, within a matrix. And I'm sure there's ways, I'm sure there's ways of setting up the paperwork where it's just a matter of semantics, that you're your own person. You get to decide when you're in the car and when you're not in the car, and what neighborhood you decide to drive the car in. I mean, literally, it's the most perfect metaphor for entrepreneurship. You drive the car. You decide. Who would want to change that? But I'm going to read more into it. So I was thinking these thoughts yesterday on my way to the farmer's market. And as I was driving, I got into a very long, interesting, protracted conversation with a girlfriend of mine about race, because I live in the middle of Hollywood, and Hollywood and Vine was where a lot of the protests took place. The initial more unsettling activities took place in my neighborhood. Very unsettling activities, graffiti, breakage, windows, etc., etc. And then, obviously, there was COVID, because during these protests in May, where we actually had a curfew, LA was under a curfew the weekend of May 29th, 30th, and 31st, which I happened to be in San Francisco visiting my family when I got the text. But because God, boy, believe what you want, but I believe God looks after fools and drunks, and I don't drink, because every single time there's been a problem, I'm not around. I'm not here. I was here for the earthquake, but it was small and nothing fell in my house. Again, I'm blessed beyond measure. I was in Miami during Hurricane Andrew, Cat 5, bad hurricane. It wasn't one of these superstorms, but it was bad. Hurricane Andrew at that time was considered unbelievable. It cracked a nuclear reactor. And I had a loose piece of molding on my car that I had forgotten to glue. Some of my neighbors had complete destruction. A tree went through a church 2 blocks away from my house. Me, the loose molding didn't even come off my car. I'm a very lucky girl, and I know that. And I feel blessed. But that being said, I wasn't lucky yesterday, or maybe I was, because I was having this conversation with a girlfriend about race. And as I approached the farmer's market, there was terrible traffic. Terrible. I'm driving down Sunset and I'm thinking, it can't possibly be, a game. There's no Dodgers game going on. That's usually when it gets that way towards the south part of Sunset. So when I actually got closer, it was a protest. It was a BLM protest in the form, in all fairness, of an impromptu street blockage / spoken word concert, if you will. Just these musicians had just camped out on the middle of Sunset Boulevard. The cops weren't going to show. There were signs everywhere, defund the police, among many other things. It made me a little bit irritated because they were very close to the farmer's market where there's families, small children, infants, babies, and they were, on a very loud speaker, like a little concert, speaking loudly and dropping every kind of F-bomb and MF-bomb you can imagine. And I felt like, I get it, but it always still, and maybe I'm showing my age, I still get incredibly offended by people cursing loudly within earshot of children. I just do. I mean, I know that that's not what our society's about. I know that when you go to Disneyland, you see people with, green hair and tattoos on their necks, wearing mouse ears with babies in strollers and dropping the F-bomb when they can't find a juice box. I get it. I get that I'm old school. I get that I'm the anachronism. But it still does something to me when I hear people saying F and MF within earshot of children, small children. But that's what was going on. And I actually sent producer Stanton the footage of this impromptu situation, about 31 seconds. I didn't need any more than that. And I was trying to catch something that didn't have any curse words. It took a minute. But I started thinking about it, and I remembered, because I know that I'm not the only person who thinks this way, that a few years ago, and it was actually 3 years ago, so it was post-election, and I know that there was a lot of controversy about different flags, and I looked them up, so bear with me, because there's a method to my madness. Race and ethnicity in the United States. And by the way, I filled out the census because for some reason, the president wants to cut short the usual tabulation of the census. I don't know why, but okay. So yesterday was the last day to fill out the census. As of July 2016, white Americans are the racial majority. Duh. Hispanic and Latino Americans are the largest ethnic minority, comprising an estimated 18% of the population. African Americans are the second largest racial minority, comprising an estimated 13.4% of the population. So I started thinking about why BLM doesn't also mean Brown Lives Matter. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks while I was watching this demonstration. Once I got over the cursing, and I really thought about it. And the reason is that, Latino people, of which I'm one, and my family came over here legally. I'm Venezuelan, Puerto Rican, and Cuban. And everybody in my family did whatever they had to do and filled out whatever paperwork had to be filled out. Naturally, the Puerto Ricans didn't have to do anything. The Cubans were here a long time ago, and we all know about the freedom flights. And the Venezuelans, my father's wife and stepdaughter had to become American citizens, and it was a costly and arduous process, even though she was married to my father, who was an American citizen. So that being said, it's arduous and difficult. And my brother is married to a Chinese girl who's delightful and has waited because of everything, and then COVID. They've been married for 2 years, and she still doesn't have her citizenship papers. It took over a year to get her green card. So there you have it. But I started thinking about the ethnic experience and why it's not BLM, brown lives, and black lives. Like, why is it so much about Black Lives Matter? And then I realized, duh, because we, Latinos, my brother's wife, came here willingly. We just said America's the land of opportunity. In fact, probably right this second, there could be a Mexican person trying to get into San Diego as we speak. I'm pretty sure there is, at least one, you know. That being said, we really have not addressed as a nation, we haven't come right out and said slavery was very, very bad and we're sorry it happened. Like, we haven't done that. Germany actually did do that, and there were some reparations. But, you know, we've done things in dribs and drabs, but there's never even been a public statement. And I'm not even sure who would make the statement. And there's states' rights. And I knew that I couldn't be the only person who has kind of come up with this. So I looked up, you know, people that have talked about these things. And I found a John Oliver rant, as I was saying, from 3 years ago. So it was after the election. Plus, he's British. And he didn't talk about slavery. He talked about the Confederacy. Because this was when it was about the symbols of the Confederate flag and what it means and why people were fighting to keep it visible. And it was about I don't know how long his rant was, but it was hilarious. It was pee your pants funny and spot on. However, he's British and he hasn't crisscrossed the country as a road comic as I have. He hasn't played Vidor, Texas, where the Grand Dragon of the KKK lived. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if they know I'm Hispanic, you know? So the reason why I said that is because, you know, even if we don't have an opportunity to have a, you know, blanket apology, because I don't even know where it would come from, I started thinking about it on a personal level. You know, me as a woman. Now, think about this on a personal level, ladies and gentlemen, that let's suppose you were dating somebody, male, female, you know, whoever you're dating, and they treat you very poorly. They trick you. They cheat on you. They empty your bank account. They cheat on you and they empty your bank account. They give you herpes. They bang your cousin. Whatever you want to think of that's like a really bad thing. And then they just disappear. They just like, you know, whatever. And then you talk to people for years because you're like, wow, you know, this thing happened and I struggled, and you know, the center for, you know, recouping my losses was there, and I filed charges, and we got some sort of, you know, an absentia claim against him, and if he ever shows up, he'll have to pay me back. But so imagine if you've been very, very hurt by a misdeed, a lie, somebody tricking you. And it's happened to all of us. I dated a man who claimed that he was separated and he had a wife who was not in on said separation. And it was horrific and terrible. And we were actually living together at the time when the ginormous lie was exposed. And I'm like, how could I have been so stupid and beat myself up about it? Blah, blah, blah. Okay? So when somebody wrongs you very badly, and this is about a short amount of time, think about in your own life how you've wanted to give them a piece of your mind or call them back, or you're just hoping you'll run into them in a public place because you were kind of left holding a bag of poison, and they send you a text and you're thinking about how to respond and you're trying to be cool, but they've kind of slipped beyond your grasp of you being able to tell them how you felt wronged. Maybe it's not even a lover. Maybe your parents did something to you that really made you feel violated and left out to dry and not supported. Something traumatized you. And then you hear for your life, that happened a long time ago. Get over it. Just get over it. Why can't you just get over it? Get over it. It happened a long time ago. As human beings, I got news for you. We don't get over things very well. That's why, drugs are a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I'm just talking about the prescription drugs. I call them subscription because the goal is to get everybody on them. That's what hypnotherapists and therapists and rolfing and Bikram yoga and acupuncture. And I mean, I could go on and on and on. Reiki, whatever. It's very hard to get over an enormous setback that you feel no one ever acknowledged and told you that was really bad and blanket sorry. So as I watched John Oliver, I thought two things. Number one, I love the way you presented all of this. And as a comedian, it's hilarious. But I want to take a moment right now that is as bad as I hated being caught in traffic, and as much as I don't like a lot of what's gone on the extreme, and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that we as a country keep telling minorities, in specific African Americans, it was a long time ago, get over it. In my own personal life, I know how I have struggled to get over setbacks. And you have generations of people. And it hasn't been that long. Okay? The Civil War ended in what, 1865? So like 160 years, give or take, But here's the part that I researched that was not in John Oliver's rant, because I'm looking at it as a minority who's made a living in America, who believes it is the land of dreams, who has not had these setbacks, and who obviously, when I walk in a room, people don't automatically judge me in any way, shape, or form for my skin color. Number one, because I'm 3/4 vampire and I never go in the sun. People never think I'm Latina straight out the gate. They just don't. They always say, when I do say I'm 100% Hispanic, all four grandparents, they would say, you're tall, you're white, your car insurance is paid on time, whatever. And actually, as I filled out the census, they actually separated not Hispanic or Latino, because they've classified the Hispanic and Latino are not races. Okay? Well, duh, I've been saying that for years. It's an ethnicity, but it's not a race. So anyway, I went on and on. The census, the race question, but extends to all ethnicities and thus can include Jewish, Arab, Italian, Hungarian, Laotian, Zulu. Okay, so a lot of people think I'm Italian, and many generations back I probably was. All Marvezes are related, and Venezuela actually comes from the word Venice. So many Italians emigrated at some point to Venezuela, and hence Venezuela. And we believe that our name was originally, I have a Me-23 in that cabinet, and I just haven't done it because I'm afraid, because they registered, and I already know I have 2 half-brothers that are illegitimate. I think they should just call those things like everybody lied, everybody lied. But we believe that our name was originally Marvez Z, and that the ZI was cut off. So I started thinking big picture in my own life, in my own life. And as much as I like to be funny, if I say anything funny now, it's by accident. And I would advise you, Google Jamie Oliver Confederacy. It's very funny, but it's not really the issue. The issue is that, we as a country need to just stop saying it was a long time ago, get over it. Because as individuals, we don't like hearing that. And I don't know what to replace it with. And I'm not pretending that I do. What I am saying is that when I broke it down and pulled it apart, because that's what I do, when I unraveled the spaghetti wire of what's really going on and just kind of thinned it out and started thinking of myself as a human being, and how when I have felt less than or challenged, what works for me, what empowers me, which is sometimes just having somebody say, I hear you, I feel you. I can't say that I get it because I don't, but I'm hearing you. And to ask people to heal from something, to get over something, is, okay, it's a little cruel, but here's the part that's the challenge for me, is that how can people start to heal from a wound that hasn't stopped? Like, at some point in this country, we have to acknowledge that the KKK is a hate group. Disband them and make them illegal. There is no reason they should have a right to exist. End of story. Because they've pretty much admitted what they promulgate, which is, separation of the races. Isn't that kind of un-American? Why is that allowed? Why has there been an ongoing fight to change flags that has come into the 21st century? I looked up, I'm just going to read you headlines that I read just as I was preparing this show. Because if I'm going to say that my goal is to wage goodness, then at the very least, I believe it's important to bring things to your attention in a way that you can feel human and not objectified in any way. Okay, flag of Georgia. Just so you know, the current flag of Georgia was adopted in 2003. There was actually a big, who shot John about getting the Confederate, what they call the stars and bars. Now, I actually have Facebook followers who are probably going to drop off and hate my guts, that have that as their symbol, and they claim that it's Southern pride and that it's part of their heritage. But at the end of the day, if something causes another human being pain, it is a symbol of subjugation and a wound. Why would you fight for that to be able to be okay? Modern display of Confederate battle flag. I went on and on and on looking at the fact that up until recently, the state of Mississippi, and that the irony is as I read the census and who lives where, the majority of African Americans live in the South, where the majority of the negative symbols, and keep in mind, these were not put up right after the Civil War to commemorate fallen soldiers. This was a big pushback to civil rights. A majority of these things were put up from 1948 until the 60s, when there was a movement called the Dixiecrats. I don't even know what that is. I mean, what does that mean? I know what Dixie means, the South, Dixie. And interestingly enough, because I love New Orleans, Dixie, D-I-X, comes from the word 10 in French, which is 10. See? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's because the soldiers had $10 Dixies. Let's get their Dixies. Let's get their $10. Let's get their money. Okay? So there you have it. I believe that as a country, no matter what we do, no matter who you vote for, and as long as you vote your conscience, I don't care. I really, really don't. But I have to say that as an American, a woman of minority background, I believe that moving forward, that we should eliminate enormous visible signs of, the Confederacy. I think they need to get over it and move on. That's who needs to get over it, is anybody who feels the need to show the stars and bars. And I know that this is going to upset a lot of people, but I made a decision that I was going to try, and I think I did a pretty good job tonight, and be fearless about, like I am on stage, about saying what I think is important. I'm not saying don't be proud of your great-great-grandpa who fought for whatever it was he believed in. I get it. There were people that at that time felt that the economic strength of the South rested on slavery. They believed that. I don't believe that. But I wasn't, in current times, that's insanely crazy to me. But then again, it's insanely crazy to me when I read historically what, the Jews went through in a biblical way, building the pyramids, and how they were randomly and continuously crushed by rocks and nobody cared. They were just expendable labor dragging giant rocks with ropes to build what we now know to be the pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For some reason, throughout history, we have felt the need to subjugate other people to do cheap labor. And it happens to this very day. And I know that, I hear it from Uber and Lyft drivers that when they started, they made more money and now they pay more fees. And see how I'm going in a circle with this? We should have more control over our dominion. And we should be kinder to one another as we grow our hustles and our side hustles. Because this time, this pause for the cause, this COVID situation has made everybody have to reevaluate this completely shaky thing we call the American economy and our access to it, and how fair or at least just it could potentially be. That's what it really comes down to, is everybody wants to care for their families to the best of their ability in the fairest of ways. Or, again, life is not fair, but in a just way. Stanton, did I do something wrong?
No, I wanted to let you know I have that video queued up that you sent to me earlier, if you wanted to show that whenever you're ready.
Yeah, they can show it, and then I'll close the show, because we're there.
Oh my God, I didn't even realize. Wow, what a quick hour. Holy crap. Okay, here comes the video.
All right, this is what I saw yesterday. This is what held up traffic for 40 minutes. Or longer. Yeah. The song was "I Don't Want to Get Out of Bed," and that was, and she said this is a slower one, and I figured it might have less curse words, but it spoke to depression and and I not to make light of it, it was kind of a scene. The whole thing was just a scene, and people were reacting to it very strongly, but at the very least, I had already been thinking about these things on the drive down, and it's one of those when people talk about, art imitates life or whatever. It's like 1 minute I'm driving, the next minute, and I'm thinking and I'm talking to my friend Michelle about these things, and the next minute I'm right in the middle of a BLM traffic jam. But because I thought what I thought, oddly enough, it didn't bother me. I parked when I could. I still went to the farmer's market. I still bought some succulents and a very nice brownie. So this week was a good week. And please, before I sign off, if you could do me a favor and take the time to find Almost London on Facebook and give her some love. It would mean the world to me. I would love her to tell me on Monday when she gets her PET scan that she is kicking ass, that they have a great plan, and that she is that the prognosis is vastly improved. So I love you guys to pieces. Thank you so much for your consideration. It was never, ever my desire to offend in any way, shape, or form. I just was hoping that maybe we could all look at a lot of things from a different perspective. Okay? Because none of us needs to get over anything. We need to move forward together. That's what I think we should do. Until next Saturday, love hard, forgive harder, and get as happy as you can as fast as you can. See you next week, guys. Love you to pieces.